What if the sun itself descended into a city where the night never ends and even hope is hunted? The rain fell like whispered confessions, soaking the cobblestones of Yharnam in blood and memory. Somewhere beneath that choking fog, a bell tolled slow, mournful, hungry. Hunters sharpened their blades, unaware that something far older than the hunt had just torn through the sky. Above the city, clouds burned gold for a heartbeat, and then darkness swallowed the light again. No one looked up. No one ever did. But something had arrived. Something that did not belong to the dream, or the nightmare. And if the beasts could feel fear, tonight they would learn a new meaning of it. Superman hit the ground, without a crater. That alone unsettled him. He hovered inches above the whetstone, boots never touching, cape hanging heavy as if the air itself resisted him. His senses screamed too many heartbeats, too many wrong shapes moving in the dark, too much death layered over death. This city wasn't alive in the way Metropolis was alive. It was rotting, breathing decay. Even the light of distant lanterns felt exhausted, barely holding back the black dot. Clark Kent narrowed his eyes. Yellow sun radiation still flowed through him, warm and familiar, yet the sky above was wrong. No stars, no moon, just an endless, bruised canopy that seemed to pulse, as if watching him back. "Okay," he murmured, voice low. "This isn't Kansas." A scream cut through the rain. Not one scream, many layered. Human voices twisting into animal shrieks. His head snapped toward it instantly. X-ray vision, piercing walls, alleys, flesh. What he saw made his chest tighten. Men and women with saw cleavers and threaded canes danced through monsters that used to be people. Limbs too long, faces split by too many teeth, blood everywhere, on hands, on coats, on the soul. Hunters. They were losing. Clark moved before he finished, thinking. A blur of red and blue streaked through the alley, wind exploding outward as beasts were torn from their feet. One creature lunged, ribs exposed, eyes glowing with madness. Clark caught it mid-air, stunned by the weight. Not physical, but spiritual. This thing was cursed. Its blood burned his hands like acid, not harming him, but offending something deeper. He threw it aside gently, too gently. It hit a wall and kept moving. The hunters froze. They stared at him like he was the monster now. One raised his gun, hand shaking. Don't come closer." Clark raised both hands, palms open. "I'm not your enemy." I heard screaming. Another hunter laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "Then you're already too late." That was when the bell rang again. Clark felt it not in his ears, but behind his eyes. A vibration that tugged at his mind, whispering of hunts unending, of gods that bled, of dreams stacked like coffins. For the first time in years, Superman felt something dangerously close to vertigo. "What is this place?" he asked. No one answered, because the beasts were getting back up. Dozens of them emerged from doorways, rooftops, sewer grates. The alley filled with glowing eyes and snapping jaws. Clark inhaled, steadying himself. He could end this in seconds. Heat vision, shockwaves, one clap of his hands. But as he looked closer, really looked, he saw the truth beneath the fur and fangs. Human faces trapped inside, souls screaming behind dead eyes. Killing them would be easy. Saving them might be impossible. Clark clenched his fists. There has to be another way. Above them, unseen, something ancient shifted. A presence stirred, curious. The arrival of a sun in a world that worshipped blood did not go unnoticed. The Great Ones had dreamed of many things, but not of him. As Superman stepped forward, light subtly pushing back the dark, the rain around him began to hiss, and far, far beyond something smiled. What happens when a man who believes everyone can be saved steps into a hunt designed to prove that mercy is a lie? The first beast reached him in a blur of claws and broken teeth, and Superman moved on instinct, too fast for the hunter's eyes to follow, yet slower than he could have been. He caught the creature by the wrists, skidding back across the stone as its weight dragged him, its blood spraying like hot rain. It howled, a sound that vibrated with pain and longing, and Clark felt it again, that wrongness, that sense of a human consciousness screaming beneath layers of madness. "Easy," he whispered, as if the thing could still hear reason. "I've got you," the beast answered by biting down on his shoulder. Its teeth shattered. The force snapped its jaw back with a wet crack, and the creature recoiled, shrieking. Clark released it, stepping back as if he were the one who'd done something wrong. Around him, the hunters stared in stunned silence. "I hear everything," Clark replied, and that was the problem. You didn't kill it," one finally said, disbelief heavy in his voice. His coat was soaked through with blood, his eyes were hollow, like a man who had buried too many nights alive. "Why didn't you kill it?" Clark looked at the beast, now scrambling away on broken limbs, whimpering like a wounded dog. "Because it's sick," he said, "not evil." The laughter that followed was harsh and humorless. "That's what we all thought." Before the blood, the bell rang again, closer this time. Clark's head snapped up. His super-hearing traced it through layers of stone and nightmare, down into the city's bones. Each toll sent ripples through Yharnam, and with them came more movement, more beasts, more hunters answering the call, drawn by instinct, by duty, by something that owned them. "This place," Clark said slowly, "it's trapped in a loop." The hunters exchanged glances. One of them, a woman with silver hair matted to her face, her saw spear resting against her shoulder, studied him carefully. "You hear it too," she said. "Then you're not just another madman." "I hear everything," Clark replied, and that was the problem. He could hear prayers muttered in fear behind boarded windows. He could hear newborn beasts crying as their bones twisted. He could hear the city itself, groaning under the weight of secrets it had never been meant to hold. Worst of all, he could hear something vast and distant, like a heartbeat the size of a world, echoing from somewhere above reality. A great one. The name surfaced unbidden in his mind, pulled from whispers and half-remembered thoughts that weren't his. Clark frowned. His mind was strong, trained, disciplined, but this place didn't push. It invited, slipped ideas between thoughts like needles into cloth. "I need answers," he said. "What happened here?" The silver-haired hunter hesitated, then gestured toward the street beyond the alley. "If you want answers, follow me. But understand this, there is no cure, no rescue, only the hunt, or becoming what we hunt." As they moved through Yharnam, Clark became acutely aware of how wrong his presence felt. Lantern flames leaned toward him, stretching, as if starving. Shadows recoiled, then crept back in longer, thicker shapes. Beasts watched from rooftops, snarling but hesitant, their instincts confused by the light that surrounded him. He noticed something else too. They weren't attacking him, not really. Circled, tested, observed. "They know you're different," the hunter said quietly, following his gaze. "The beasts can smell blood. And you," she sniffed the air, "you smell like the sky." Clark almost smiled at that. Almost. They reached a plaza where dozens of corpses lay piled, some human, some no longer recognizable. At its center stood a massive church, its doors sealed, its spires clawing at the black sky. Clark's X-ray vision pierced the stone and immediately recoiled. Inside, something looked back. He staggered half a step, hand to his temple. For a fraction of a second, he wasn't in Yharnam anymore. He was floating above an ocean of eyes, stars blinking like pupils, gods whispering his name with voices made of static and prayer. "Sunborn," they murmured, uninvited. Clark forced himself back into the moment, breathing slowly. The hunters noticed. "You saw it," the woman said, "didn't you?" "Yes," Clark answered. "And whatever it is, it's watching me." High above, beyond the false sky, a presence shifted its attention fully onto him. The hunt had found something new to chase or to test, and deep within the dream, a doll lifted her head, eyes suddenly bright with curiosity. What if the one place that feels safe welcomes you with kindness only, to reveal that it exists, to make sure no one ever truly leaves? Clark felt the shift before he saw it. One moment he was standing in the rain-soaked plaza, the stench of blood and rot thick in his lungs, and the next the world folded inward like a closing eye. Sound vanished, weight vanished, even the constant pressure of Yharnam's despair slipped away, replaced by something eerily calm. Grass brushed his boots, real grass, soft, alive. He stood beneath a pale, impossible sky, washed in moonlight that didn't belong to any moon he knew. Ahead of him, headstones curved in quiet rows, their inscriptions worn smooth by time and memory. At the center of it all burned a small, steady lamp, the hunter's dream. Clark straightened slowly, senses flaring. No blood cries, no screams, no beasts hiding behind heartbeats. The silence here was curated, maintained, like a museum after closing hours. "You are not dreaming," a gentle voice said behind him. "At least, not in the way they do." Clark turned. She stood near the workshop steps, hands folded, porcelain calm etched into her face. The doll, he didn't know how he knew her name, but he did. Her eyes reflected the moonlight like still water. and when she looked at him, Clark felt something unexpected, not hostility, recognition. "You don't belong to this dream," she continued softly, "yet here you are." "Neither do they," Clark replied, gesturing back, toward Yharnam, toward the world beyond this place. "But you keep bringing them back." The doll tilted her head. "The hunters return because the dream wills it, because the hunt must continue." "That's not an answer," Clark said. "That's a sentence." A faint smile touched her lips. "You speak like one who believes sentences can be rewritten." Clark looked around again, studying the workshop, the weapons laid out with almost loving care, tools designed not just to kill but to endure, to repeat, to fail, and try again. "This place is a cage," he said quietly. "A beautiful one, but a cage all the same." For the first time, something flickered behind the doll's eyes. Curiosity, perhaps even doubt. "You see more than most." "I have too," Clark said. "It's my job." He felt it then, the pull, the dream pressing gently against him, testing his will. It wanted to anchor him here, bind him to rules written in blood and echoes. Hunters were meant to wake here, to die here, to rise here again. But Clark did not rise from dreams. He stepped forward, and the dream resisted, like water thickening around his legs. The headstones trembled. The lamp flickered dot far above the dream, beyond even the pale sky. Something noticed. A great one stirred. "You cannot save them," the doll said, her voice still calm but now threaded with warning. "Not from this. The blood has changed them. Insight has broken them. Even if you end the hunt, they will remain." Clark met her gaze. "I've heard that before. On 100 worlds." He thought of Metropolis after Doomsday, of cities rebuilt after alien invasions, of people who had looked just as lost, just as broken, and had still found a way back. "Tell me who's really in control," he said, "and tell me how to stop it." The doll hesitated. Then, slowly, she turned her gaze toward the sky, toward the place where the moon should have been. "There is one who dreams the dream," she said, "one who binds the hunters, who guides the night. To challenge him is to challenge the cycle itself." Clark followed her gaze, feeling that distant heartbeat again, stronger now, closer. "And if I do?" he asked. The doll looked back at him, and for the first time, her voice softened into something almost human. "Then the dream will try to claim you, or destroy you." As if in answer, the ground trembled. The workshop creaked. Somewhere beyond the headstones, the air split with a sound like tearing silk. Something was coming. Clark squared his shoulders, sunlight flaring faintly beneath his skin. "Then it's going to learn something new." Above the dream, the false moon cracked just a little, and a god began to descend. What happens when a god that was never meant to be challenged realizes the intruder before it cannot be claimed? The sky of the hunter's dream did not shatter all at once. It peeled layers of pale illusion, sloughing away like dead skin, revealing a deeper dark beneath. The moonlight warped, bending into impossible angles, and Clark felt gravity hesitate, unsure which way was down. Every instinct he had screamed that whatever was coming was not bound by physics, not by logic, not even by time. Then it emerged. The moon presence did not descend so much as unfold. A mass of bone-white limbs and stretched flesh, hanging in the air like a nightmare given anatomy. Its many eyes did not blink. They calculated, each one locked onto Clark with predatory focus, and the pressure that followed was immediate and crushing, not on his body, but on his will. Clark's knees bent half an inch before he caught himself. Around them, the dream reacted. Headstones cracked. The grass wilted to ash. The lamp flared wildly, its flame stretching toward the presence like a desperate prayer. "So," Clark said through clenched teeth, forcing his breath steady, "you're the one pulling the strings." The moon presence answered not with words, but with intent. A wave of dominance rolled outward, the same command it used to break hunters, to bind them to endless death and rebirth. The dream reached for Clark, trying to slot him into its machinery, trying to define him as prey, as servant, as tool. For a fraction of a second, Clark felt something frightening, the pull of surrender, not because he was weak, but because the presence was ancient, beyond comprehension. It spoke in instincts older than morality, older than hope. To it, free will was a malfunction. The hunt was balance. The dream was mercy. Clark roared, sound tearing through the dream like thunder. Golden light burst from his eyes, not heat vision, not yet, but raw solar power flaring in defiance. The pressure shattered. The presence recoiled, limbs curling inward as if stung. The doll cried out, stumbling back. Impossible. It is never. It picked the wrong world to haunt. Clark growled. He launched himself upward, fist cocked, and struck the moon presence square in its central mass. The impact rippled across the dream, a shockwave that split the ground and sent headstones flying like shrapnel. The presence shrieked a sound that wasn't heard so much as remembered, echoing through every layer of the nightmare. Clark followed up, driving it back with blow after blow, each strike burning with stored sunlight. Bone cracked, ethereal flesh tore, black ichor spilled and evaporated before it hit the ground, and still, it didn't die. The presence lashed out, a limb whipping around Clark's torso with impossible strength. For the first time since arriving in this world, Clark felt himself yanked through space. He slammed into the workshop, splintering ancient wood, the walls screaming as if alive. The presence descended, hovering above him, its eyes burning with cold fury. You are not prey. Its will pressed into his mind. You are an error. Clark pushed himself up, chest heaving. Get in line. The presence's power surged. The dream twisted, reshaping itself into chains of light and shadow that wrapped around Clark's limbs, dragging him toward the lamp. He felt the mechanism now at the moment where hunters were bound, where choice was overwritten. This was where it ended for them. Clark clenched his fists, muscles straining as the chains dug in. No, he said, voice low but absolute. This is where you let go. He focused not outward, but inward, on the sun, on the warmth that had always been his anchor, on every life he'd ever sworn to protect. The chains snapped. A blast of solar energy erupted from Clark in all directions, vaporizing the bindings and tearing a hole straight through the dream's sky. The false moon shattered completely, revealing a void of writhing stars and watching eyes beyond the moon. Presence screamed again, this time, in something very close to fear. Clark hovered in the air, eyes blazing, cape snapping in a wind that shouldn't have existed. It's over, he said. You don't own them anymore. But the presence did not retreat. Instead, it reached past him into Yharnam, into the waking nightmare, pulling something else forward. Something older, deeper, a backup plan written into the cosmos. Clark felt it before he saw it. A child's cry, and the dream began to collapse. What if the final weapon of a god isn't brute force but innocence twisted into an unbreakable chain? The cry pierced Clark in a way no blow ever had. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was small, fragile, trembling like a newborn calling out into an uncaring universe. The sound cut through the collapsing dream and anchored itself somewhere deep in Clark's chest, bypassing strength, bypassing will, bypassing logic. The moon presence recoiled, its broken form drifting backward as the void above split wider. From within that tear, something descended slowly, wrapped in pale light and umbilical cords of nightmare logic. A child, not human, not fully. Its body was soft, luminous, unfinished, limbs too smooth, eyes to knowing. The cords tethered it to the dream, to the presence, to the endless cycle of the hunt itself. The orphan. Clark froze mid-air. Every instinct screamed danger, yet every moral fiber screamed something louder. Protect it. The presences will flooded the space again, but now it was layered with something new: desperation. This was not a weapon meant to kill Clark, it was a weapon meant to stop him. You cannot strike what must be saved. The orphan writhed, its cry rising into a wail that bent reality around it. Shockwaves rippled outward, tearing chunks from the dream, hurling debris into the void. The doll collapsed to her knees, hands pressed to her ears. Clark dropped to the ground, landing gently despite the chaos. He approached slowly, hands open, heart pounding. It's scared, he whispered. You did this to it. The moon presence hovered behind the child, its form stabilizing as the orphan cried. Power flowed back into the god through the umbilical cords, feeding on Clark's hesitation. Strike, the presence urged wordlessly. End the cycle by ending the source. Clark looked at the orphan's face, and saw it. Not malice, not madness, loneliness, a being born into a nightmare it never chose, weaponized before it could understand what it was. Clark felt something twist painfully inside him. I won't, he said firmly. The presence lashed out in fury. The orphan screamed, and the dream convulsed. Clark was thrown backward, slamming into the ground hard enough to crater it. For a split second, darkness crowded his vision. And then Yharnam rushed in, not physically but emotionally. He felt every hunter bound to the dream, every death, every rebirth, every moment of despair stretched across endless nights. The weight of it pressed down on him, heavier than any planet he'd ever lifted. This is what breaks them. Clark realized, not the monsters, the hopelessness. He rose slowly, pain radiating through him in a way that had nothing to do with injury. His powers still burned bright, but they felt challenged. This world wasn't draining him, it was testing him. The orphan hovered between him and the presence, crying harder now, its power surging uncontrollably. Waves of force slammed into Clark, cracking bone and warping space. He didn't fight back. He endured, planting his feet, letting the blows wash over him. "I see you," he said, raising his voice over the chaos. "You don't have to be this." The orphan's cry wavered. For the first time, it looked at him, not with rage, with confusion. Clark stepped closer, ignoring the presence's fury, ignoring the way reality buckled with every step. He knelt, lowering himself to the child's level. "I was sent to worlds that were afraid of me," he said softly. "Worlds that tried to turn me into a weapon. I didn't let them." The presence screamed silently, its form unraveling again as the orphan hesitated. The cords pulsed violently, tightening, trying to pull the child back under control. "No," Clark said, gripping the cords with both hands. They burned like the core of a dying star, but he held on. "You don't get to decide what it becomes." With a roar fueled by compassion rather than rage, Clark tore the cords free. The orphan screamed one last time, then went silent. The dream froze. The moon presence convulsed, its power bleeding away, its control severed. It tried to retreat into the void, but the hole above was closing, collapsing inward like a wound finally sealing. Clark cradled the orphan gently as the child's form softened, its light dimming into something peaceful. The god thrashed, unraveling, reduced to a shrieking shadow as the dream rejected it. And then the presence was gone. The hunter's dream began to burn. Destruction. In release. What happens when the nightmare loses its master? But the world it poisoned still doesn't know how to wake up. The fire didn't consume the hunter's dream the way Clark expected. It didn't roar or devour. It unwound. The grass dissolved into light. The headstones crumbled into drifting ash. The workshop cracked apart, boards lifting into the air like memories finally letting go. The lamp, the eternal anchor, flickered wildly, then dimmed. Clark stood at the center of it all, the orphan held carefully in his arms. The child no longer cried. Its strange, luminous body softened, edges blurring, light fading into something faint but steady, not dead, not alive in any way Clark understood, at peace, as if a song had finally ended. The doll approached slowly, her steps uncertain, as though gravity itself no longer fully applied to her. She looked at the child, then at Clark, and for the first time, tears traced silent paths down her porcelain cheeks. "The dream is ending," she whispered. "I can feel it. Slipping away." "That was the point," Clark said gently. "But the hunters," she said, voice trembling. "Without the dream, when they fall, they stay down." Clark finished. Like everyone else, the truth hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. Around them, the dream continued to dissolve, revealing not void but layers, realities peeling back. Clark's senses stretched outward, following the unraveling thread straight into Yharnam itself, and what he felt there made his chest tighten. The city was in chaos. Without the dream reinforcing the cycle, death suddenly meant something again. Hunters who fell stayed dead. Beasts, no longer held in check by the hunt's unnatural rhythm, rampaged without pattern or restraint. Fires burned unchecked, bells rang without answer. Hope surged, and terror with it. Clark gently set the orphan down as its form faded into nothing more than a warm glow that dispersed into the air. He stood, eyes hardening with resolve. "The cycle's broken," he said, "but the damage isn't undone." The doll nodded slowly. "You have freed them from eternity, but not from consequence. That's where I come in." The dream collapsed completely, and Clark felt himself pulled, not dragged, back into the waking nightmare of Yharnam. He arrived like a falling star. The impact shattered the street, a shockwave blasting outward that sent beasts flying and knocked hunters off their feet. Clark rose from the crater instantly, cape snapping behind him as rain steamed against his skin. Every eye in the street turned toward him. Beasts snarled. Hunters hesitated. The bell tolled once more and then went silent. Clark inhaled, his voice carrying across the city, resonant and impossible to ignore. The hunt is over. Some laughed, some screamed, some dropped to their knees in disbelief. A massive cleric beast lunged from a cathedral rooftop, roaring in fury. Clark met it head-on, not with restraint this time, but with finality. One precise strike shattered its spine mid-air. It hit the ground and did not rise. Gasps rippled through the street. "He killed it," a hunter whispered, "and it didn't come back." Clark turned, eyes scanning the crowd. "You don't have to do this anymore," he said. "Put the weapons down. Live." A hunter with shaking hands dropped his cleaver. Another followed, then another. Not all. Some hunters snarled, eyes too far gone, insight burned into madness. They charged. Clark moved. He didn't hold back now, not in mercy, but in purpose. His speed blurred into streaks of light through the rain, blows precise, disabling, ending threats cleanly. Beasts fell. Mad hunters fell. The streets cleared faster than fear could spread. Above the city, the sky changed. The false moon cracked, then vanished. For the first time in generations, stars appeared over Yharnam, real ones. People looked up, sobbing, laughing, breaking under the weight of something they'd never thought they'd see. Morning. But Clark felt it even as the light crept in. Something else was stirring. Not a great one, not a god, but a truth far more dangerous. Without the dream, humanity would have to face what it had become. And some of them would hate him for it. What if saving a world means becoming the thing it fears most? Its mirror, its unforgivable reminder. The first sunrise Yharnam had seen in ages did not bring peace. It brought clarity. As golden light spilled across crooked rooftops and blood-stained streets, the city revealed itself without the comforting distortion of nightmare logic. Buildings were older than they looked, rotted, cracked, barely standing. Bodies lay where the hunt had left them, no longer fading, no longer resetting. The air smelled of smoke, decay, and something else. Guilt. Clark hovered above the central plaza, cape drifting softly in the morning wind. His eyes moved constantly, tracking heartbeats, listening to voices, separating panic from rage. He had ended the hunt, but the aftermath was louder than any bell. "They took it from us. He killed the dream. My brother won't come back now." The whispers spread like infection. A man stumbled into the plaza, face gaunt, eyes wild with half-burned insight. He pointed up at Clark with a trembling hand. "You did this," he hissed. "You doomed us. Death was mercy. Now there's only truth." Clark descended slowly, landing among them. "Truth is painful," he said, "but it's real, and it gives you a choice." A rock struck his shoulder. It shattered on impact, but the intent landed harder. Others followed stones, broken bottles, curses screamed through tears. Not all, but enough. Hunters who had lost purpose, scholars who had lost gods, people who had built their entire existence around the lie of eternity. A former hunter stepped forward, blade still slick with blood. "You think you're better than us," he snarled. "You think light makes you right." Clark met his eyes and saw the madness receding just enough to reveal despair underneath. "No," he said quietly. "I think you deserved better than what they turned you into." The man screamed and charged. Clark moved, instantly disarming him, snapping the blade in half, pinning him gently but firmly to the ground. The crowd recoiled, fear flaring again. "Listen to me," Clark said, raising his voice. "No gods are coming back. No dreams are saving you. That means what happens next is yours." For a moment, silence fell. Then the church doors creaked open. Figures emerged in ceremonial robes, eyes clear, posture proud. The remnants of the healing church, those who had survived by hiding, by waiting. Their leader, an older man with scarred hands and a voice sharpened by conviction, stepped forward. "You speak of freedom," he said, "but you've stripped us of purpose, of transcendence. You were feeding people to monsters." Clark replied evenly, "For enlightenment." The man countered, "For evolution." Clark's jaw tightened. "There is no evolution in chains." The man smiled thinly, spoken like a god who doesn't understand humanity. That word God rippled through the crowd. Clark felt it settle over him like a shadow. Above, beyond sight, something ancient watched, not in hunger, not in malice, but in curiosity. The great ones were gone, but the universe still observed anomalies, and a sun-powered alien standing in the ashes of a nightmare was very much an anomaly. "You fear me," Clark said, not accusing, acknowledging. "I get that, but I'm not here to rule you. I'm here to make sure this city survives what comes next." "And what is that?" the church leader asked. Clark looked out across Yharnam, his vision piercing deep into basements, labs, catacombs. He saw what remained failed experiments still breathing, half-born abominations sealed behind doors that were never meant to open. The true cost of humanity's reach. Consequences, he said. A scream echoed from the lower wards. Then another. Then dozens. Clark's head snapped toward the sound. His hearing isolated it, instantly panic claws, stone breaking. Something massive was moving beneath the city, awakened by the collapse of the dream. The crowd felt it too. The ground trembled. The church leader's confidence faltered. That shouldn't be possible. Clark rose into the air, eyes glowing faintly. It is now. From the depths of Yharnam, something ancient and human-made began to crawl toward the surface, an abomination born not of gods, but of men who had tried to replace them. And for the first time, Clark wondered if saving this world might require him to stay longer than he ever intended. What if the greatest horror left behind isn't cosmic but human ambition given flesh and rage? The street split open like a wound. Stone buckled, buildings screamed as their foundations collapsed inward. And from the depths of Yharnam rose something that had never been meant to see the sun. It was vast, larger than the cleric beasts, larger than any great one Clark had sensed. Its body was a grotesque lattice of human forms fused together, torsos and limbs half recognizable, faces locked in eternal screams. Tubes and iron braces jutted from its flesh, remnants of laboratories and failed restraint. The survivors gathered in small groups across the plaza. Former hunters cleaned wounds instead of weapons. Church scholars argued in hushed voices, their certainty fractured. No one knew what tomorrow was supposed to look like. Neither did Clark. A young woman approached him, limping, her arm wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. She stopped a few feet away, clearly unsure if she was allowed closer. "You're really going to leave?" she said. Not a question. Clark looked down at her. His X-ray vision saw the broken bone, the infection starting, the exhaustion that went deeper than flesh. Eventually, her jaw tightened. "Then teach us." That stopped him. "Teach you what?" "How to live without monsters," she said. "Or gods, or you." Others nearby turned, listening now. Clark felt the weight of it settle onto his shoulders, heavier than the cosmic pressure, heavier than the dream ever was. This wasn't about fighting anymore. This was about building. "I can't stay forever," he said carefully. "And I can't be your solution." "Then be our beginning," the woman replied. Clark closed his eyes for a moment. He saw Metropolis, Lois at her desk, tapping her pen impatiently. He saw the fortress, silent and waiting. He saw a world that needed him just as much. And then he opened his eyes and saw Yharnam. "All right," he said quietly. "Here's how this works." Days passed, not in montages of triumph, but in slow, grinding effort. Clark reinforced collapsing structures, lifting entire buildings long enough for people to shore them up properly. He cauterized plague outbreaks with controlled heat, sterilizing streets without burning homes. He dismantled hidden labs beneath the city, carrying their horrors far out to sea where they could never hurt anyone again. But he didn't do it alone. He taught former hunters learned to defend without bloodlust. Scholars learned medicine without ritual. Leaders were forced to answer questions they'd avoided for decades, and slowly, painfully, the city changed. But so did Clark. The sun here was weak, filtered through a sky that still hadn't fully healed. He felt it in his bones, now his strength returning more slowly, his flights shorter, his reactions a fraction less instant than before. No one else noticed, he did. At night, he stood alone on the highest tower, listening to the city sleep. He felt the cosmic presence shift, recalculating again and again. "You are overstaying," it seemed to say. One evening, the doll appeared beside him, not as part of a dream but as something free. "You're fading," she said softly. Clark didn't deny it. "I'm adjusting." She looked out over Yharnam, lanterns glowing like constellations pulled down to earth. "They will survive now, I know. And you?" she asked. Clark was silent for a long moment. "That's the part I'm still figuring out." High above, the stars dimmed slightly, an almost imperceptible warning. The universe was done waiting, and Clark knew the next choice he made would cost him something he could never get back. What if the price of saving a world, isn't measured in lives but in the very power that defines you? Clark felt it before he saw it, a tension in the air, subtle but undeniable, like the moment before lightning strikes a mountain. The stars above Yharnam twitched as if anxious, the atmosphere vibrating with a frequency he hadn't felt since his first encounter with the moon presence. The cosmic entity had not left, it had only stepped back, biding its time, measuring the limits of a world it had once ruled in shadow. He was walking along the main square, overseeing reconstruction, when the first sign appeared, a shadow that didn't belong. Not a beast, not a hunter, just darkness, solid, heavy, and impossible. He stopped mid-step, feeling the hair on his neck rise. The air grew thick with a presence that was aware of him, calculating, waiting. The shadow detached itself from the stone of a ruined building. It took shape, a figure familiar in outline yet impossibly wrong. A hunter, but not a hunter. One of the Abhorrent Choir's remnants, animated by some leftover memory of the dream, fused with the darkness of the presence's will. Its eyes burned with human recognition, but its intentions were alien. It knew him, and it knew he had power. Clark didn't hesitate. His fists glowed faintly, preparing for combat. But instinct told him this wasn't about strength. The figure stepped closer, limbs bending unnaturally, voice layered with dozens of screams. You saved them. But at what cost? Son. Clark's chest tightened. Every movement in this city still carried weight. Every decision was amplified by lingering echoes of the dream. I saved their lives, not yours, he said calmly. Why are you still here? The creature hesitated, and then laughed, hollow, melodic, terrifying. Because you forgot one truth. The world does not forgive power. Even when it is used to heal, it corrupts. Even light becomes a weapon. Clark's eyes narrowed. He had seen this before. Every world had its consequences. But Yharnam was different. This was not just guilt, it was instability. The presence's design had left cracks in reality itself. And now those cracks were reshaping themselves, using what remained of the hunt as a lens to judge him. The creature lunged, faster than human, but slower than him. Clark moved with controlled force, intercepting it mid-air. His punches weren't meant to kill but to test, to restrain. And with each clash, he felt his own strength waver, subtly, imperceptibly, as though the very laws that allowed him to fly, to lift, to endure, were being taxed. The creature backed away, circling. Do you feel it? You are not infinite here. Not like you think. Clark gritted his teeth, realizing the truth he had ignored. His powers were no longer absolute in Yharnam. The city, reshaped by the collapse of the dream and the defeat of the moon presence, had a subtle resistance. Reality itself, guided by the remnants of cosmic oversight, had begun to fight back against him. You think you are here to protect, the figure hissed. But every choice leaves a shadow. Every action tears a part of you away. Clark's fists glowed brighter. He surged upward, fists meeting the creature in a collision of solar energy and corrupted memory. Sparks erupted, shattering nearby stone. The child survivors who had begun rebuilding homes froze, terrified. But he didn't strike to destroy. He struck to contain, to test. And with every second, he felt it more acutely. His connection to the sun, to the very energy that defined him, was slipping. I can't lose myself, he whispered, almost to himself. Not here, not now. The creature laughed again, 1,000 layered voices. You already are losing, Sonborn, and soon you will understand what it means to be mortal in a world that refuses to forget its sins. Clark's eyes flared. He hovered above the square, sweat mingling with rain. The city watched, his chest heaved. The creature advanced again, and this time he realized something terrifying. He might not have enough power to stop it without sacrificing the fragile stability he had fought so hard to build. And as the sky above began to darken, stars, trembling in response to his strain, Clark understood the unthinkable. Saving Yharnam might cost him everything that made him Superman. What if the cost of being a god in a world that refuses gods is losing your very essence? Clark hovered in the air, fists clenched, eyes blazing faint gold. The city beneath him was quiet, now too quiet. Survivors had scattered, seeking shelter, watching, hoping, fearing. He could feel their gaze on him even without looking. Yharnam had learned, slowly, painfully, to survive without the hunt. And yet, in the shadows, reality was fighting back. The corrupted hunter, a remnant of the Abhorrent Choir, and the presence's lingering will circled him. Each movement sent ripples through the air, distorting it unnaturally. Clark could see threads of energy running from the creature into the streets, into buildings, into the very air itself, as though the city itself was feeding it. You're weakening, the creature hissed, voice layered with screaming and sorrow. Do you feel it? Your light diminishes here. Clark exhaled, voice calm but laced with urgency. Then I'll have to be smarter. The battle began in earnest. Clark moved faster than the eye could follow, dodging strikes, grappling with limbs that bent like living metal. His blows were precise, calculated. designed to restrain, not destroy. But with each clash, he felt the solar energy within him fade slightly, as though Yharnam itself was absorbing it, calibrating itself against his power. He glanced down. The city's buildings leaned toward him, not in reverence, but in reaction. The shadows pooled like liquid, pressing at him from below, weaving into the creature. The line between monster and environment blurred. He wasn't fighting just one being, he was fighting the weight of an entire world reshaping itself. Clark's vision expanded. Every heartbeat, every sigh, every flicker of light in the streets below was magnified, magnitudes beyond anything he had felt before. And within it all, the creature struck again. A crushing blow sent him slamming into the cathedral steps. Stone exploded outward, but he did not falter. He rose immediately, breath ragged but eyes steady. "You think your strength can fix this," the creature said, voice echoing with agony and disdain. "But you are not absolute. Not here. You cannot bend this world to your will." Clark's fists glowed brighter, the faint aura of sunlight flaring around him. "I don't need to bend it. I need to protect it." He surged forward, striking the creature's core with precise blows, each pulse of energy tearing at the corrupting threads that bound it to the city. Screams layered upon screams as the being staggered, yet it did not fall. The threads wrapped tighter, and Clark felt his connection to his solar reserves falter. Each moment drained him not fully, but noticeably. His chest burned, arms trembling, as if the sun itself was being filtered through a sieve that stripped away its essence. Clark gritted his teeth. "I can't stop. Not now. Not when they're finally free." The creature roared a sound that made the remaining structures tremble, sending dust and debris cascading. "Then accept your fate. Lose what you are. Become human in a world that refuses salvation." Clark paused mid-air. For a heartbeat, he considered it. Every instinct, every memory of Metropolis, every lesson from every battle reminded him of the stakes. He could fight and save this city, but at what cost? He could leave, preserving his power, but abandon the survivors to chaos. And then he made his choice. He channeled everything he had left, every ounce of solar energy, every shred of determination, into a single, focused strike. Light flared brighter than the sun over Yharnam, washing through the corrupted creature, severing the threads connecting it to the city, burning the residual influence of the presence out of the streets. The creature screamed, a final sound that was simultaneously anguish and release, before collapsing into a lifeless, steaming heap. Clark hovered above it, chest heaving. His strength was diminished, faint tremors running through his body. He wasn't at full power anymore, not even close. The city below him was intact, but the effort had left him human enough to feel the weight of his choices in a way he hadn't in decades. The survivors emerged cautiously from their shelters. They stared at him with awe, fear, and gratitude, but Clark could barely meet their eyes. The doll appeared beside him silently, watching. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "You did what none of us could, yet you are changed. The city lives, but so have you. Lost something essential." Clark looked down at Yharnam, the rain washing away the last traces of nightmare. "I'll adapt," he said quietly. "I always do." But even as he spoke, he felt it. A subtle hum beneath his skin, a reminder that the sun that had always been inexhaustible, infinite, and constant was now finite, delicate, and somewhere, far beyond the stars. The presence, though broken, still observed. The universe was taking note. The anomaly had survived. But for how long? What if the hardest battle isn't against monsters, gods, or cosmic forces, but against the fragile trust of the people you saved? Clark landed lightly in the central plaza, his cape flaring in the wind, his body still humming faintly with the remnants of drained solar energy. The city beneath him was quiet now, but it wasn't peaceful. Survivors emerged from the rubble, hesitating as they saw him. Their eyes weren't just filled with gratitude, they held doubt, suspicion, and fear. The kind of fear born not from monsters, but from freedom. For generations, Yharnam had depended on the hunt. It had been the law, the cycle, the only constant. Clark had broken that cycle, removed the gods, severed the chains of the dream, and purged the remnants of the moon presence and the abhorrent choir. But what came next was unknown, and people always feared the unknown. A former hunter stepped forward, his saw cleaver hanging loosely in his hand. His face was pale, eyes wary. "You saved us," he said slowly. "But you took something from us too." Clark nodded, expecting this. "I freed you," he said, voice calm but firm. "I didn't take your lives. I gave you a choice you never had before." The hunter shook his head. Choice is dangerous. We trusted the hunt. We needed it. Now what? Who guides us? Who protects us if something worse comes? Clark's jaw tightened. He looked around at the city, the broken streets, the survivors slowly picking up tools, rebuilding homes, helping the wounded. He saw the weight of generations of fear etched into their movements. You protect each other, he said simply. I can't do it for you. Not anymore. A group of scholars from the healing church stepped forward, murmuring amongst themselves. One of them, a tall woman with eyes bright with intellect but shadowed by doubt, spoke. But what about the things still lurking beneath? The experiments, the remnants of the choir, the echoes of the dream. Even without gods, we are still vulnerable. Clark exhaled slowly. He had anticipated this. Then you prepare, he said. You learn, you heal, you build systems that don't rely on monsters or gods to enforce order. That is your responsibility now. A hush fell over the plaza. The words were heavy, almost unbearable. Freedom was a gift, yes, but it was also terrifying. And in their eyes, Clark saw something he hadn't expected. The first flickers of courage, tentative, fragile, but real. And then he heard it. Not a roar, not a bell, but a faint, rhythmic pulse beneath the streets. Something alive, something human-made, yet dangerous, an echo of ambition unrestrained. Clark's eyes narrowed. He had destroyed the abhorrent choir, purged the threads of the presence, yet the city still had hidden dangerous creations of humanity's own flawed genius, the nightmares of desperate men and women who had tried to wield godlike power. He turned to the doll, who had been watching silently. Her expression was unreadable, but she nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Even freed, this city will not forgive weakness, she said. You've saved it, but you will never leave without paying a price. Clark looked down at the survivors, then back at the doll. He realized she was right. Yharnam had been changed. He had been changed. The city's people would survive, but they would always measure him against the sun he once carried without consequence. And now, that sun was dimmed, finite, delicate. A sudden shout came from a rooftop. A figure leaped down, landing with unnatural grace, a hunter, but not entirely human anymore. Mutated in ways subtle yet disturbing, shaped by the old hunt, surviving beyond what should have been natural limits. You're not leaving, the figure cried, voice raw with desperation and rage. This city needs you, Sunborn. Without you, it dies. Clark's eyes flared with restrained power. He hovered, cape snapping in the wind, facing the figure with measured calm. I won't abandon the city, he said, but I can't fight it for you anymore. You have to learn to stand on your own. The figure roared, rushing at him with feral speed. Clark dodged, barely moving, guiding the hunter's momentum harmlessly into a wall. The clash sent debris scattering, yet he did not strike to kill. Every move was controlled, every action deliberate, a lesson in restraint, in power without domination. The city watched. Every survivor, every scholar, every former hunter felt the weight of the encounter. They were witnessing what it meant to live in a world where gods had fallen, where monsters had been purged, and where one man, no longer absolute, had chosen to give them responsibility. Clark landed on the plaza steps, the hunter still struggling against his restraint. You have a choice, he said. Every day, protect this city. Protect yourselves, learn, or fall. But don't expect me to do it for you. The figure froze, chest heaving. Slowly, awareness began to replace rage. Around them, Yharnam seemed to inhale. The streets, the survivors, the city itself held its breath. For the first time, the future felt uncertain, not controlled by gods, not bound by the dream, not dictated by monsters, but alive. High above, the stars twinkled faintly, as if observing, calculating. The presence that had once judged the world had stepped back, waiting, patient, for the next anomaly to reveal itself. And Clark knew, deep down, that freedom had its cost, and that someday, the universe might demand repayment in ways he could not yet imagine. What if the real nightmare isn't the monsters you fought, but the fragile hope you leave behind? The streets of Yharnam were quiet now, save for the drip of rain from damaged roofs and the occasional clatter of rebuilding. Survivors moved carefully, still wary, still learning to trust their own hands instead of the invisible chains of the hunt. Clark stood at the highest tower, watching, feeling the city pulse below him like a living heart finally beating under its own rhythm. But beneath that heartbeat, he sensed the lingering echoes, the remnants of the dream, the whispers of the moon presence, the subtle corruption of humanity's own ambition. They were faint, like embers smoldering in the ashes, but he knew enough about Yharnam's history to understand. Even a world freed can relapse if left untended. The doll appeared beside him silently. "It will take generations," she said softly. "Even without gods or monsters, this city will always carry the memory of its sins." Clark nodded, eyes scanning the streets far below. "Then they need to carry it wisely." A sudden movement caught his attention. Figures emerged from the shadowed alleys, former hunters, scholars, even a few civilians. They approached slowly, carrying debris, bandages, tools. Their eyes were cautious, but determined. They were coming toward him, unafraid, unshackled by the expectation of divine intervention. "You taught us to survive," one of them said, voice steady. "But we need guidance, not control, not power, just..." He hesitated, searching for the words. Direction. Clark exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of centuries of heroes and lessons pressing down. "I've given you all I can," he said. "The rest is yours. Every choice you make from here, it's yours to bear." A faint glow appeared in the distance, rising from the depths of the city. Clark's eyes narrowed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. The city still held secrets, corners untouched by even his intervention. A small group of former scholars had been experimenting in the hidden basements, creating remedies and traps in the hope of controlling what they didn't understand. Light flickered unnaturally from their efforts, casting elongated shadows across the streets. He realized the truth immediately. Yharnam's salvation would never be complete, even without the moon presence, even without the hunt. Humanity's ambition, fear, and desperation would always be a breeding ground for nightmares, and some of those nightmares might be beyond even him. Clark's cape flared as he took off into the night sky, circling above the city. He felt lighter, no longer burdened by the immediate presence of gods or monsters, but heavier in a different way. Knowledge weighed more than power, responsibility more than invincibility. The doll watched him silently from the tower. "You could leave," she whispered. "The city is no longer bound to you. You could return to your world." Clark's eyes scanned the horizon. He thought of Metropolis, of the people who depended on him, of the worlds where hope was fragile and yet necessary. He also thought of Yharnam, this city of scars, resilience, and pain. "I could," he said softly, "but it's not my time yet." He hovered over the streets, seeing survivors attempting to rebuild, some fighting despair, others helping each other for the first time, without the hunt's structure. It was messy, fragile, imperfect but real, and somewhere in the shadows, beyond the gaze of the city, he felt it again, a presence observing, not hostile, not benevolent, just patient, waiting for the day when Yharnam would either rise fully or fall back into darkness. The universe had its eyes on this anomaly, the man who had walked through gods and nightmares and refused to bow. Clark exhaled, feeling the strain in his body, his powers, once limitless here, still slightly diminished by the subtle resistance of Yharnam itself. But he had learned something vital. Being a protector wasn't about absolute strength. It was about endurance, patience, and the courage to let others grow in your shadow. The doll's voice came again, quieter this time. "Do they truly understand what freedom means?" Clark looked down at the city, lights flickering in the rainy streets, and smiled faintly. "Not yet," he said, "but they will, and that is enough for now." As he flew higher, the stars above twinkled faintly, the faint echoes of the presence still lingering at the edge of the sky, watching, calculating, waiting. Clark's figure shrank into the night, a golden streak against the fragile darkness, a reminder that hope, even in a broken world, could endure. What if the final choice isn't about defeating monsters, but deciding what kind of god or human you will become? Clark hovered over the city one last time, the wind tugging at his cape, carrying with it the faint smell of rain and smoke. Yharnam stretched beneath him like a scarred, breathing organism, alive, uncertain, raw. The survivors moved among the ruins, tentative steps toward a life they had never truly owned before. Each one was fragile, each one was human, and each one would carry the memory of what had been taken from them, and what had been given. The doll appeared beside him silently, as she always did, though now she seemed almost weightless, more real than ever. Her hands were clasped in front of her, eyes reflecting the first hints of dawn. "You could leave now," she said softly. "You've done what no one else could. The city will survive, maybe even thrive. Your work here, it is done." Clark shook his head. "It's done enough," he said. "But done isn't the same as finished." He looked down at the streets, at the people beginning to rebuild, to argue, to cry, to laugh. to live. Every choice they made from here would echo across generations. Every step they took would either honor the freedom they had earned, or lose it. I need to make sure they can stand on their own, truly stand. The doll tilted her head. And if you fail, what then? Clark's eyes softened, glimmering faint gold in the dawn. Then at least they will remember that someone believed in them. A faint tremor ran through the city, subtle enough that most people didn't notice, but Clark felt it immediately. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a god. It was the city itself, testing its legs, flexing its wounds, seeing if it could support life without falling back into the nightmare that had defined it for centuries. From the depths of the shadows, faint whispers drifted, remnants of the moon presence, echoes of the Abhorrent Choir, the last shreds of nightmare and ambition that still lingered. They whispered not of fear, but of inevitability. That power attracts consequence, and freedom attracts choice, and that choice, for a city so long broken, could be as dangerous as any monster. Clark clenched his fists, feeling the subtle burn in his chest where his solar energy still lingered, now restrained by the reality of this world. He had been more than invincible here once, but now he understood the fragile truth. Being a god in this place meant restraint, wisdom, and the willingness to sacrifice not just comfort, but certainty itself. He descended slowly into the plaza, landing lightly before the survivors. They looked up, eyes wide, some fearful, some hopeful, some both. He raised a hand not as a command, not as a savior, but as a signal of partnership. "You've survived the hunt," he said, voice steady, carrying over the quiet. "You've survived gods, monsters, and yourselves. Now it's time to survive without me. That is the true test, and it won't be easy. Some days will be worse than any nightmare you've faced, but you will survive. I know you will." The survivors hesitated, absorbing the weight of his words. Slowly, hands unclenched, faces softened. A tentative murmur of agreement rose among them. For the first time, they weren't waiting for salvation, they were deciding to live. Clark stepped back, looking at the city, at the rising sun piercing the horizon, golden light flooding streets and buildings and hearts alike. His powers hummed faintly within him, reminding him that he could leave at any moment. He could return to Metropolis, to his world, to the life he had left behind. But for now, he lingered, a guardian not of fear, but of trust. The doll's voice came again, almost a whisper. "Do you think they will honor it?" Clark smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. "They will, because they choose to. That's all the guidance a world needs." Above, the stars dimmed as the remnants of cosmic judgment receded, the universe taking note of a singular anomaly, a being of light who had entered a world of darkness and left it free. Not perfect, not unscarred, but alive and capable of growth. Clark looked once more over Yharnam. The city would face mistakes, horrors, and challenges. It always would. But for the first time, it would face them on its own terms. He turned toward the sky, rising higher, feeling the faint pull of home, of another world, of another responsibility waiting. But as he ascended, he glanced back at Yharnam, the people who had finally learned to live on. A quiet hope settled in him that this city, this nightmare turned human, would endure. And somewhere beyond the stars, the moon presence and the universe watched silently. They had lost a battle here, but in their eternal patience, they waited for the next anomaly, the next choice, the next story. Clark flew toward the horizon, a streak of gold against the fading night, carrying with him the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victory is simply teaching a world to stand, and knowing that hope, once planted, can grow even in the darkest soil. The hunt was over, the city was free, and the sun had not abandoned them. The end.